What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for listening. I wanted to put this in the top of the show. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/Brennan Tassif. Check out the merch store at brennantcomedy.com to get your ex-drinking buddy merch. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, we're coming to you live from Gotham Production Studios, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Grab me your beer and grab me a coke. We bout to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brennan T Comedy on your social media feeds. And Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Brennan Tassif is your ex-drinking buddy. There's going to be a graphic there. I am your host, Brennan Tassif. If you're new to the program, quick rundown of the show. I used to be everyone's favorite drinking buddy. It was my favorite thing to do, hang out with friends, get drunk, do drugs, get in all sorts of trouble, and then reminisce about those fun stories. I am sober now, but it is still one of my favorite things to do, hang out with someone and reminisce about the crazy old days. Most weeks I'll be joined by a guest. This week is no exception. All the way from New York City, Carlos Gasperi.
Woo. Thanks for having me, man.
What's up, man?
Not much. Life, comedy. I don't know.
Comedy. Plug everything up front before we get too far into the episode. Social media, this will come out this week, so any dates you have coming up next week, anything like that.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess Instagram is just Carlos G Comedy. And then I started producing a show at Eastville called The American Immigrants, my co-host Roman Gutierrez. So the next date is May 9th, 8 p.m.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We'll link it in the show notes. Everybody check it out. I wanted to have you on, and this was kind of funny because like with some guests, you have a real job, career that you have. So I was like, hey, do you want to come on? And you were like, let me think about it. I got to think about this. But I'm so happy you came on.
For sure.
I wanted to talk about, because you had a very interesting upbringing. You're from Venezuela. You didn't move here until you were 18 to the United States.
Yep.
And now you live in the biggest city in the world and do stand-up. So how did that even happen?
I honestly, sometimes I don't even know. 'Cause, so I left Venezuela when I was 18 to go to college here. It was all kind of like a very predetermined path. Like when I think of like what I wanted to be as a kid, it was a software engineer.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I mean, not necessarily a software engineer. I would always say that I wanted to be an engineer. But looking back on it, I think I was just kind of following whatever path had been given to me and wasn't really challenging that. So I was very much like a rule follower growing up. Like,
Okay.
Got good grades in school. Like, the whole thing was like, what's like the best college I can go to? This whole like idea of leaving Venezuela. And
So in Venezuela, your parents aren't expats, right? They're from Venezuela.
So my dad's from Venezuela. My mom's American.
Okay.
But she's half Colombian, so she already knew how to speak Spanish.
So is
when
that
they
you
moved
grew up
there.
in a house speaking Spanish? Like it was full Venezuela.
So Spanish with my dad, English with my mom.
Okay.
And English with my brother. I
Okay.
have one sibling. Yeah.
So are you still fluent in Spanish?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Native speaker. Yeah.
It always, because you have the bit, and I always burn everyone's bits because I love comedy so much. But you're always like, I'm the diversity hire if you want everything to look the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But it's true. Like, I mean, you grew up in Venezuela. You're from Venezuela. You lived there till you were 18. And what prompted you to come to the United States? You said it was like a predetermined path, but was it always like, oh, the best colleges are in the U.S., so that's where I'm going?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So like my parents put me, for the most part, I went to this like American school.
That's what I was
in
just about to ask.
Venezuela.
Okay,
Yeah, it was
okay,
an international
okay.
school that was basically made for expats originally, and then that kind of fluctuated over time because
Yeah, because you don't have an accent or anything.
Yeah. So I mean, I basically
Like, I
grew
work
up,
with a lot of people who are from South America, and they don't sound like
yeah,
you.
yeah. It's like, yeah. I mean, it's because I've been speaking English and going to school in English my whole life,
Yeah.
basically. So it's like, even so, in the school that I was in, the American school, like you had to speak in English like all the time. Like,
Okay.
you'd actually get in trouble. Well, not in trouble, but like they would try and get you to stop speaking.
Yeah, that's like when
Spanish.
people
Yeah.
do the what is it called? Study abroad. They're like, oh no, you have to speak whatever languages.
Yeah,
you're-
yeah. They try and like
yeah.
it, like fully
And if they
immerse
catch you speaking English, they're like, hey, we're in Spain. You have to speak Spanish.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I had a lot of friends that like weren't speaking English at home at all. So for
Yeah.
them, it was super useful to like speak English like from the moment they got to school to the moment they went home. It was
Yeah.
like, so I have some friends that are full on Venezuelan, no American influence, but also speak almost perfect English.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, which is funny. Yeah.
So what was the process growing up in Venezuela and then coming to the United States? What was that process like? Is there a lot of paperwork involved, or because your mom's American,
Yeah, I was born a U.S. citizen. I was super lucky in that regard.
Were you born in the U.S. or just born
I was born in Venezuela, but because my mom was American, like I was
Yeah.
technically a citizen at birth or whatever it's
Yeah.
called. And yeah, so then when it came to like applying to schools, applying to college, like the idea was I would leave. The whole point almost of joining the American school in Venezuela was to make it easier to go to college in the States.
Okay, where did you go to college?
Carnegie Mellon. It's in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And forgive me for saying, but isn't Carnegie Mellon, it's an art school, isn't it?
So it's known for two things. Art. So the art people know it for art. The
Yeah.
engineers know it for engineering.
Oh, so it is an engineering
So
school.
it's both. It's like the
Okay.
two main strengths are engineering and art.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you talked about it on stage one time, and I was like, wait, you do tech? Like, what are you talking? Like, that's an art. It's like someone saying, oh, I went to Juilliard for engineering. In my head, I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it's funny because even when I'm going there, I only knew it for being an engineering school. So I was surprised when I attended.
So
that it
you
was
get
even-
there and you're like,
I was
who
like,
are
yeah,
these fucking artists? Who are these nerds?
yeah, yeah.
So you go to Carnegie Mellon. Thank you. I try. You go to Carnegie Mellon, and then I wanted to talk to you about getting into stand-up because that's the first half of the show. A lot of the time is getting into stand-up, and you have a very unique path. I've had so many people on, like especially people who are actors or moved to New York for stuff like that. It's like, oh well, I was doing acting, then improv, then I did stand-up, and there's a very clear path. Like we talked about it with Carly last week. I've talked about it with other guests on the show before. So for you, none of those things exist. You go to an art school, but it's an engineering school for you. And then also you're a software engineer. You're a very analytical thinker. So like, how did you even get into comedy?
It's funny because I was exposed to a little bit of comedy growing up. I mean, like SNL or whatever
Yeah.
we would get in Venezuela. I mean, we'd get most stuff. It was kind of like delayed. It was
It's not, yeah,
it wasn't like I never heard about SNL until
not the 1800s. Like, well, we didn't have TV, so whatever trickled down from.
Yeah, exactly. So then, I was kind of like, as soon as I left college, I moved to Seattle and I worked at a big tech company and basically worked at tech companies for like 10 years. And then I'd say my first kind of big exposure to stand-up, I had seen like a few stand-up
So
specials
up to this
growing
point,
up.
I don't mean to interrupt, but up to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point, you have no like real exposure to stand-up. Because I've had people be like, oh, John Mulaney. For me, it was Dane Cook. Other people, it was, Jim Gaffigan, Brian Reed. Like, everyone in their high school had those CDs floating around. In our time, it was CDs. Now it was like Spotify and stuff. Almost everyone I talked to that had exposure to stand-up had that. But now you're talking about, you're in your almost 30s at this point, and you still have no exposure to stand-up.
Yeah, I mean, my only exposure was like, if I try and remember like, what's his name? Like the Indian Canadian guy, Russell Peters. I remember seeing one of his specials, maybe going to one of his shows early on. And then when I was in college, I saw one like Louis C.K. special that was like one of his first ones that came out on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that was maybe like the first time that I remember being like really impacted by watching like a full hour of stand up. I mean,
That's
like,
awesome.
Oh my God.
That,
this is incredible.
It's just cool that, now you're in New York and you're doing stand-up in New York, but it blows my mind. It's like in sports when they're like, oh, he didn't start playing basketball until he was like a junior in high school. And you're like, this is like one of the best players in the NBA. Like, what are we talking about? So you got exposed late. What was you said the Louis C.K. thing was the first vivid memory you have. What was the thing that when you're in Seattle that kind of like pushed you over the edge to try it?
Yeah, so I didn't actually end up trying it until San Francisco. I lived in Seattle for like 4 years, and then in San Francisco, and then New York. So I kind of did like all like the tech, like cities. So when I was in San Francisco, I was like, it was almost like in the back of my mind, it was like starting to cook.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, like I really want to try this.
And that was just from watching that a few specials online or on Netflix.
And then I guess after college, I got into like Aziz Ansari and like all these other comics started coming up and really started becoming more of a fan of watching it.
As someone who just loves comedy, it blows my mind when people don't. Like what you're talking about, I understand that. You're like, oh yeah, Aziz and these people. And you're like, yeah, of course. It blows my mind when people are like, oh, I don't really watch stand-up. I'm like, what? Like, I don't get it. Because I'm like, it's literally the people go out there to try to just make you feel the best feeling in the world, which is laughter. And they're like, no, I don't do that. I don't do that. Okay.
It's amazing. At least the performing side of it was like, when I think back, I'm like, how did I not think of trying it earlier?
Yeah.
And I was like, I just never thought that was like, I never saw like the opening, or I never thought that was like available to me.
Yeah. People don't understand that you can just do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was part of it because I was just, like I said before, I was just kind of like in this one track mindset of like, I'm an engineer. I'm like trying to be successful in this one thing. And it's like, I didn't think of anything else.
So I wanted to ask you, and we'll jump around a little bit, but when you're at Carnegie Mellon and you're going to school for engineering, was that like, were you like, okay, I'm here, like I did it? Like were your parents like, oh, mijo, we're so proud of you? Like, was that like a thing where it was just like, okay, we're done?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of like, You mean from their perspective of like, are they?
Yeah,
like,
just
proud
from
of
your
this?
life perspective, because I talk. It's a bit I do on stage, but I remember talking to a guy who was 25 and he had just finished law school. He was buying a house and he was engaged. And the bit is, well, I was going to jail just out of rehab at 25. So who's really living their best life? But the truth is, like, I had no idea what I was doing up until my 30s when I got sober the last time. So I'm saying for you at 18, 19, 20, 21 in college, going for engineering, are you like, okay, this is the set path? Like, I figured it out. I'm done. Did you had no Okay, I was gonna say you had to have had reservations about, do I even want to do this? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I kind of like implied that I kind of knew the path from the beginning, or like had a lot of confidence in it, because I said that when I was a kid I wanted to be an engineer.
Yeah, that's why I thought you were just like, oh, I made it, I'm done.
Yeah, no, but the whole time it was like, when I decided what my major was going to be, even though I had said that as a kid that I wanted to be an engineer, when it came to deciding my major, I like literally sat down with my mom once and we got this book that was like, if you like these things, what should your major be?
Oh, really?
And I wasn't even going for, I ended up studying computer science, but when I applied, I was like electrical engineering, computer engineering, like a bunch of different.
Yeah, because my brother did chemical engineering at Cornell.
Really? Yeah. So I considered a few different engineerings and ended up going with computer science only because Carnegie Mellon was like better at that than the other majors that I had applied
really?
for.
Okay.
Yeah, and ended up loving it once I tried it.
So do you like code and stuff?
Yeah. That's what I basically did like for like 10 years.
Why are you not like doing everybody's like website and stuff?
Well, because now, I mean, over time, certain things get way, way easier to do to the point that it's like not worth someone's time. Like you can do a website without basically knowing any coding.
That's
today.
That's what we did. Here, check it out. BrennanTComedy.com. Brought to you by Squarespace.
Like Squarespace. I mean, changed the game.
Yeah, Wix,
in a lot of
Squarespace,
ways.
all that. And it's interesting you say that because my brother also codes. He needs it for chemical engineering. And it's so funny because 10 years ago, when I first thought of like, oh, I need a website, or even maybe 15 years ago, because I started comedy in 2009, it was like an impossible task. And I talk about this a lot, but I started the podcast Drinking Buddies a long time ago. My buddy Danny's been on the show before. And then we like banked a bunch of episodes, but then never released it because back then, like RSS feeds and all that, it was so foreign to everybody. Yeah. And now my twin sister's calling me like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. It's super easy. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So for you, I'm sure even when you were going to college, all of the stuff that is possible now seemed impossible. Like you had to be a professional to do it. So when you're at school and you decide, okay, I'm going to do computer science, was there a part of you that was like, any little part of you that was like, I don't know if I even want to do this?
Yeah, maybe I wasn't super conscious of it, but it was almost like I just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And the whole priority was like getting a job, because a lot of my friends that had gone to college in the States from Venezuela, I mean, there's a difference. Like a lot of them weren't U.S. citizens, but a lot of them, like, they couldn't get jobs and had to move back.
Oh, really?
And then, I mean, I could have stayed in the country technically, but if I didn't have a job, I wouldn't have the money. So I would probably gonna have to move back anyway. So that was kind of like a big thing. It's like I didn't want to go back to Venezuela.
You can't make me go back. You're like Leonardo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not fucking leaving.
Yeah.
I'm not fucking leaving.
Exactly. I mean, because Venezuela, so the last, like, from like 1998 till like now, basically, there's been like this steady decline in the economy.
Has it really?
Steady. Yeah, I mean, the country's in a really, really bad place and has been for like 20 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's been like a huge
So you're like, so what brought
catastrophe,
why are your parents still there, if you don't mind my asking?
That's a good question. It is like a family question.
They're like, no, Carlos, it's home. We're staying. We're not leaving.
It's hard, man. I mean, especially at their age, like they've been living in Venezuela for like 45 years or something. It's hard to just stand up and leave, even if they're in a lucky position that because my mom is American, like my dad could leave.
Well, that's what I was thinking, is they could leave tomorrow if they wanted to.
It's also the financial situation. Like, it's so much more expensive to live here that even if they sold everything in Venezuela and moved away, it still wouldn't be like a piece of cake to move to the States.
Yeah.
And like,
so in your head, though, once you're here, you're like, I'm not going to go back.
Yeah.
So out of college, the first job you get is Seattle?
First job I got was Seattle, yeah.
Okay, and then you're there 4 years, you go to San Francisco.
4 years, then San Francisco, and I was there for like another 4 years.
Is this all tech related?
All tech. I was working I was working at Amazon. It was massive company, obviously, and then
you didn't have to put the qualifier on there.
Yeah, but it was
working at Amazon. It's a pretty big deal.
But I mean,
company.
In the sense that it made me feel like an ant, like I was insignificant. Yeah. So I wanted to work at a smaller company, and that's why I moved to San Francisco. I ended up working at like an 80-person company.
Oh, okay. Is that company still around?
No, so it got acquired right away, like 6 months later.
That's what always happens.
Yeah.
I only know this from talking with my older brother, who, again, is a chemical engineer, and he's worked for nonprofits and startups and all these different things. And then he worked for P&G for a long time, but which is the situation that's similar to what you were doing with Amazon, where he's like just a cog in the machine.
Yeah.
And then it's so interesting because he's like, yeah, when you work for a startup, the whole goal is basically to get acquired. Like that for a lot of the people who start it, it's like, oh, we just want to get a good, what is it called? Initial evaluation. And then all of a sudden you're worth X amount of dollars and then someone buys you for that. And you're like, all right, I'm out. I don't ever have to work again, which is insane to me though. Cause it's like, but this was like, if someone came to me and said, hey, Brennan, I'll pay you $1 million, but you can never do stand-up again, I'd be like, fuck off. Like, no. Well, first of all, after taxes, that's going to last me like a couple years maybe. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them end up doing it again.
So really?
They'll take 2 years off. I mean, the really successful ones, which it's just kind of like a misconception. Like, the only people that really do well in startups are like, it's a very, very small amount of them.
Same thing with show business.
Pretty much the founders only. And like the early employees at some of the big company, like the companies.
Well, we all saw Social Network. We all saw what happened with Facebook. And I'm not even making a joke. Like, he edged his buddy out. And then all of a sudden his stock was worth like nothing.
Yeah, it was like drama, all that. Yeah, all that stuff happens.
So were you a part of something similar to that at the smaller company in San Francisco?
Yeah, except that I didn't make money because I only been there for 6 months. But it was still fun. It was like Twitter acquired us. So it was like cool seeing like an acquisition by a big company that everybody knows, and then going into what I call like Twitter's like golden years before all this stuff with like Elon happens now. But it was kind of like I don't know. Let's just say it was like a very comfortable place to.
Yeah. So you were still working there. You were 6 months in. They get acquired, and then you worked there for another like 3.5 years.
Something like that. Yeah, like 3 years. Yeah.
At what point? Because you said you didn't start in Seattle. At what point do you first get on a stage?
Right. So I did a class in San Francisco. I'm like, I was never gonna. Looking back, and actually, I think I heard Anthony Jeselnik say that like. It's kind of the same like mentality. Like I was never gonna go by myself to an open mic and get on stage. Yeah. I was never gonna be that type of person. I think I had a lot of stage fright, stuff like that. So I was like, oh, a class is like a way that I can maybe experiment.
It's a door in,
Yeah, it's a door in. And then that class, the one in San Francisco, like totally sucked. Like he didn't even mention open mics. He didn't even like get like he put us up like in class in front of like 10 people, like maybe like once per student or twice per student, something like that for like an 8-week class. I don't even know what we were doing.
That sounds horrible,
to be honest. So it sucked. Like I didn't get excited about it. It was like the worst way to get introduced to it. And then New York is like I moved to New York.
So that was the only time you'd been on a stage.
Pretty much.
In San Francisco.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even have called it a stage because it was like the guy's like classroom.
So then you moved to New York. Is this again for work?
It's again for work.
Okay.
So I had kind of like so I left Twitter because I also felt like I was kind of wasting my life in the sense of like, you're getting.
It's such a big flex to be like, then I leave Twitter,
So
I'm not getting along with some of the people there, the founders, I just can't do it.
But it's kind of like what you were saying, right? It's like if somebody offered you $1 million to like to do stand up and to like, but you don't feel like you're making any sort of progress in stand up, you're like, no, I'd rather not be making money but be enjoying my life. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's actually I'm actually at that crossroads right now, and I don't know it fully. But with the one-man show, everyone's like, oh, like not everyone, but a bunch of people I spoke with, like big comics are like, this is going to be your thing. This is going to be your thing. And it's exactly what you're saying is like, in my head, I go, yeah, but I want to do, I want to do stand-up.
Yeah.
And this is not, it's the furthest thing from it. And they go, oh, yeah, but you'll be on stage. It is comedy in a way. It's just a little different. I go, yeah, but I don't know if I want to do that. And then the more I've sat on it and like reflected, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know this is actually a great way to make money and to get noticed and stuff. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, well, it's kind of the same thing. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what I want to do. So I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It hasn't been the first time that I'm like, oh, like it sucks, like making good money and quitting. Because my parents are the first ones who are like, dude, like you don't live in Venezuela, like
yeah, right.
like,
you live in the most expensive city in the world.
Like you're living a good life. And I'm not saying I wasn't living a good life, but from the career perspective, from the professional perspective, like I felt like I was, I worked in a bunch of projects that ended up getting canceled, and like all my work was just going to waste. And I'm like, sure, like I am getting a really good paycheck, which is awesome. So all your financial problems go away, but then like the problem of like self-fulfillment is still there. Like I don't.
Well, that's the whole thing. I work at a really swanky steakhouse downtown. The listeners know we never say the name of it though, because sometimes we talk about our guests, and I don't want that getting back to anybody because some of them are incredibly famous. But that's the thing is people are like, hey, if you went full time or if you worked 6 days a week, you could clear close to 150 a year. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't move to New York to wait
to do that.
And there's obviously there's nothing wrong with it. I love waiting tables. I love being a server. It's like actually I'm very passionate about it. It's very competitive, and you get to know a lot about stuff, and you get to make people come in for big things like anniversaries and birthdays, and I get to be a part of that, and I love that. But my ultimate goal is stand up. Right. So I tell people all the time, it's like, no, I'd rather work 3 days and maybe 3 or 4 days there and maybe struggle a little bit financially, but still be able to do the shows, get booked on stuff, go to mics. Like, I'd much rather do that than work 6 days a week and live like, oh, my New York life, but like I'm not doing comedy. It's like I could just move back to Florida where there's no state income tax and do this. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're making a sacrifice for the thing that is really the important thing.
Yeah, and that's the difference between people who not only make it but even attempt to try, is that sacrifice. Because there's so many people who would listen to this and go, yeah, right. Like, I would never give up a good steady paycheck to like do a hobby. And it's like, well, that's why you're never gonna do. In the words of Brad Pitt and Troy, that's why no one will remember your name. So you get to New York, and then what? I want to know so badly what pushes you to start going to mics. Was it a friend? Were you over your stage fright? Like, what happened?
It was another class.
You did another class?
I did the Laughing Buddha class. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
which is I was like, okay, if the San Francisco's not a good place to do a class, this has to be the best place in the world to do a class. Like,
yeah.
And it really was an incredible thing. You know, it's like they make you get up in front of everybody. They give you a free mic every week. They force you to do. Well, they don't force you. But like, there's kind of like that.
Get up there.
There's kind of like if you'd get to the class the next week and you hadn't done your mic and everyone else had, like you kind of felt that pressure to do it. And then yeah, I think after that it was kind of like a similar experience how other people discover comedy, right? You know, you just feel the feeling and then you kind of just get hooked.
Was it one of those things where because you were so much later to the game, did you find yourself being so much more like excited about it at mics and stuff like that than the peers and the people around? Because I've noticed, you know, like I said, I started in 2009 and I still have like this weird childlike obsession with comedy, which is why I laugh so much at the mics. Which is why I go, like, I'll just go after work. I go to the Stand or the Cellar to hang out and just watch comedy because I'm obsessed with it. When a special comes out, I watch it and then I watch it again. And like, I just love it so much. And so I think I'm an anomaly because I know plenty of people who have been doing it as long or longer than me and they're so jaded and they don't watch stand up and like they just hate it. So for you getting to it a little later, were you obsessed with it? Was it one of those things where you were just trying to go to like every mic every day? Or because it was a little later in life and you were more mature, were you kind of just like, oh, I know I should do this on these days and like plan it out?
It took me a while to be like, to have the confidence or like the courage to be like, hey, I'm actually going to change the direction of my life to point it towards stand-up.
Okay, let's talk about that. How long did it take? So you do the Laughing Buddha. Yeah,
I did that, and then I really liked it, and then I was like, okay, I didn't have that, like, nothing had opened in my mind that was like, oh, there's actually a possibility for something that I could do, because I was still so ingrained, and like, I had just joined a small company here in New York, is why I moved to New York. Yeah. It had been started by like some people that I had worked with in the past, and it was like small enough that I was like, okay, like last time I tried to work at a startup, it got acquired right away. This is going to be like my opportunity to see what it's like to grow a company, which is something that I had always wanted to see.
And then when it gets acquired, you're going to be one of those guys.
I mean, yeah, in the good case. But I was like, yeah, I knew that it's not super likely. So I was like, I'm going to do this for the joy of seeing, you know, what it is to build a company.
Watching something grow,
Yeah, exactly. And you feel so much more ownership. You don't feel like your stuff is going to get thrown away.
Yeah.
You feel like so much more impactful in the job. And that was becoming true as I was working at this company. So then I discovered stand-up like within like a few months of joining this company. And then I'm kind of like for the first 3 years, kind of just like both things, and I'm like, you know, if I
chicken
like,
or the egg, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
I know that feeling because, like I said, I do love my job. So it's weird because there are some times where they're like, oh, hey, so and so's coming in. Like, do you want to work tomorrow night? Like Channing and Zoe are coming in, and I'm like, God, I really do, but tomorrow's my mic day, and I get into this weird spot where it's like, yeah, but it'd be fucking so cool to hang out with Channing and Zoe again. So you get into this weird spot, and I mean, it's obviously apples to oranges, but it's that same feeling of like, well, I want to be here, but I also should be there, and now I don't know what to do.
And again, like with the not again, but like this idea, people have this preconception that like, oh, a passion is just something. Once you discover it, you like drop everything, and you leave it. And I'm like, people like more than one thing, right? It's like,
for sure.
Yeah, I as much as like I feel like software engineering is not going to be my priority for the rest of my life, like I did really like it while I was there, and I don't see it as like a waste of time or something like that. But once you, in the moment of like discovering this other thing, I was like, like this is just a hobby. Like I have to keep doing this thing that I promised that myself I was going to do, which is the company. Yeah. But then I was in the back of my mind, I was like, all right, like if I can take a risk, like a calculated risk, I will pursue stand up. Okay. And that was kind of in my mind. So I worked at the company for 4 years, and I was like, all right, like.
And you're doing stand up the whole time.
Yeah,
like
doing stand up, but I was doing somewhere between like, I wasn't doing a ton. I was maybe like on a good week, maybe I could squeeze in like 7 mics, maybe like somewhere between 3 and 7 was not a lot, especially people that's first starting out. But
yeah, that's the thing, is because I did the mics and I did the bar shows and I did all that shit before I moved to New York. You saying 3 to 7 mics, I'm like, that's a great week. But obviously when you're now, 10, 15 years later.
Right.
But when you're just starting out, it's so weird because it's you can forget how hard it is to start. Like it's been so long that I don't even remember my life without like looking forward to an event that had me on a microphone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I can't when people go like, how do you do that? I go, it's just a part of me.
Right.
It's
just like a nature now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I couldn't, but to your point, when you just start out doing 3 to 7 mics a week, and you're actually trying to get good, because there's people who start out. Stephen Baker, a guest on the show, made a very poignant observation. He says like karaoke. There's some people who go there and go, I'm going to make it as a singer one day. There's some people who go there to get drunk and dick around with their friends. Open mics are the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So for you, when you're first starting out, and this is something you really want to do, and now you're doing 3 to 7 mics a week, and in the city there's hundreds, so you're kind of thinking like, God, I'm like so far behind. And you started late too, comparatively to people who started like 18, 19, 20. So what was the tipping point? You said you did that for a while, and then what was the tipping point to where you switched?
So over time,
And disappointed everyone in your family.
Yeah, there's a good amount of that, but well, kind of. They've been pretty supportive. My brother actually studied philosophy for like 14 years.
Yeah.
So I feel like in a lot of ways he kind of warmed them up to like one of their sons doing something that was kind of out of the ordinary. And he did that. He studied that in college. So, and he's older than me, so he was kind of like the one that like broke through.
You can always pull the whole like he studied philosophy. I am philosophy. Like I'm on stage.
Right. Exactly.
People listen to me.
Sorry, what were we saying?
When was the switch? When did you decide?
So the switch
okay, I'm going to
like,
do comedy.
Was like, I still only saw it as a hobby when I first starting out. I was like, yeah, I wish I had started earlier, but then I was like, oh, and I can't actually squeeze that many mics in, and then it wasn't really like I feel like I could be good at this, like until like maybe like a year or two in. I'm like, this isn't going away. I feel like whenever I hang out with comics, like I feel kind of like I felt something that I hadn't felt when I would hang out with software engineers in a way. 100%. I felt like this is like kind of like we're like kind of the same personality in a way, which I took. I'm not saying that like if you're going to be a software engineer, you have to feel at home with every group of software engineers you sit down with, but like it did feel different. It felt
it was
like
the first time in my entire life, because I've been a loner most of my life. I didn't have a lot of friends. It was the first time in my entire life when I sat around a table with comics and I go, oh, I figured it out. You know what I mean? Like I found it. Because for so long I always felt like something was off. I was never like a broy bro, so I never got super along with the jocks. I was never super smart, so I never got along with this really smart kids. Like I would hang out with those different groups almost as like an acquaintance to everybody, but I never had any like close friends. And then when I started hanging out with comics, I was like, oh,
this is my people.
We're all the broken toys. Like I get it now. Like it's us.
Yeah.
So for you, that's what you started to feel as you started to pursue comedy. Was there a tipping point when you decided, I'm just going to do this? Or like how did you get to your situation today?
Yeah, it's a good question. So
thank you.
So with startups in general, when you join, the incentive, like the way that you make money is they give you a chunk of the company. Like you become an owner, right? They typically have like a vesting schedule, which is like it's funny if I hear like my ex-coworkers hearing this, you're gonna like laugh at this, because it's like at the 4-year mark is when all of that was promised to you actually becomes yours.
Okay.
Right. So it's kind of like the incentive to stay is then like your salary or whatever, but like they tend to maybe give you more shares in the company, but like not that many more, especially if you joined early.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that leave right around the 4-year mark.
Yeah, they get their
whatever
they
get their
package,
equity,
and then
they head out. Like that's when it is. So it's like and in tech people move jobs a lot.
Yeah.
So like staying at a job for 4 years is kind of like an average for like when a lot of people leave.
Okay.
I'd say even leaving, it's not even like frowned upon to leave after like
it's
2
almost
years
expected.
of a company. Yeah, it's almost expected. So it was like that's kind of like a natural progression. And I was like, all right, what am I going to do? This 4-year mark is coming. Stand-up's been pulling at me. I always told myself I was going to do this if I had the chance. Like now's when I need to do this.
So that's what happened.
And that's what happened. That was September.
You hit the 4-year mark. You decided to leave the company and then just devoted all your time into stand-up.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, I will need to figure out the money situation. That's
Well, no, you're vested. You have a part ownership.
Right. But then that's another thing about startups is like, unless the company gets acquired or goes
not worth
public,
anything.
it's not worth anything really. It's only worth something on paper.
Yeah.
Until that happens, that could be years
Yeah.
from now, or
But
it never
you get
happened.
to keep that though, right? That's yours.
Yeah, that's mine
Okay.
forever. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
But what sucks is like some people like, oh yeah, they leave the company it's worth I don't know how much on paper, and then something happens to the company collapses, and then it's worth nothing. Like this actually happens to people, which is so.
And I'm sure that probably happens more often than the company
yeah.
getting acquired and becoming rich.
Way more often. Yeah, especially now there's a huge economic downturn. All the startups are getting like kind of screwed, to be honest. Yeah.
So, but hey, you got stand up.
Yeah.
You talk about it on stage.
We don't make money doing stand up now, probably not.
Right. God. I wanted to ask you. So, coming from Venezuela, growing up in South America, was like drinking and was partying and all that. Was that a big part of the culture as you were growing up?
100%. Yeah. So in Venezuela and like a lot of South America is like this, where we have like the quinceañera, which is like the sweet 16. So, you're turning 15, the girls are turning 15, the parents are throwing them these huge parties with like open bar. You're running around as a 15-year-old,
Just getting
completely
hammered.
accepted. Yeah. And like, obviously we would get hammered, but it was so accepted that like, I feel like with American culture, it's like, binge drinking, all this stuff happens more because it's kind of like you're doing it in hiding.
It's funny you say that.
I squeeze it in like
different part of the world. Anya Jones was on this podcast talking about in Russia, similar thing, where in Russia drinking is a part of the culture and it's very accepted and they treat it with respect. And then when it comes to America, it's almost so frowned upon that you have to do it in secret, and then you have to do it in the binge drinking and the parties and the sneaking out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So different part of the world, but it's similar kind of perspective on drinking, where it's like, oh no, this is something fun we do on occasion.
Yeah, exactly. And my parents were always like very accepting of it. Like the first time I got like really hungover and had to like throw up,
When did this happen? How old are you?
I was like, I want to say I was like in 8th grade.
Yeah, of course you were. Venezuela. You heard it here first, folks.
And I like wake up. I'm like, oh, what is this? I didn't. It's like I
so
didn't
what
know.
prompted it? Were you at someone's quinceañera and you were just getting crazy?
This was just like at a house party, just like at my friend's place with like his parents like walking around, and like it was just like everyone drinking Smirnoff Ices.
Oh
like,
my god,
that was my first hangover. Was Smirnoff Ices.
It's syrup. It's literally syrup.
Oh, it's gross, dude. I feel like I still have like a kind of disgust towards Smirnoff Ices. I swear it was from that first hangover.
Yeah. That's how I am with rum. I loved rum so much that now
nice.
I can't. I mean, I don't drink at all anymore, but before I got sober this last time, I would try to drink rum like, oh, the old days, like college, fucking here we go, little Sailor Jerry. And I would literally, it would touch my lips and my gag reflex would be like, and I'd be like, I guess I'm a vodka guy now.
Yeah, rum is like a tough hangover.
Yeah. So this happens in 8th grade, but there was no yelling, there was no fighting, there was no like freak out. Everyone's just like, yeah, that's what happens.
No, like I remember waking up and feeling sick, and I was like, I think I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna go tell my parents that I'm feeling sick because I drank. And they're like, oh, are you okay? Like, all right, like go. Like, do you need to throw up? Like, go throw up.
Yeah,
like, super
okay.
nice about it. Like they were like, this is what happens. Like, and it's so ironic because
Learn your
like,
tolerance. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like somehow them being so supportive of it, maybe like be like, oh, okay, it's just like a normal thing. I also like learned what excess is. And I feel like you have to learn it through hangovers, but
absolutely. But that's the other thing too. I've noticed in different cultures, European and Latin America cultures, excess is not like a thing that's so coveted like it is in American culture. And I don't know if it's the capitalist background or the free market, whatever it is, but this idea of like, I have to have all of it. It's all for me. Like I have to have all of it. Like, it blows my mind because working at the restaurant, sometimes I'll wait on tables and there'll be one guy at like a 6-top and they'll order 1 bottle of wine. There's only 4 glasses in that. So you have to do like, you have to do server math and be like, all right, well, this is how much I can pour. And I'll pour that much. And there's always seems to be one guy who's like, oh, no, I'll take a little more. And it's like, no, this is for the whole table. Like, you don't understand. Like, this is for everyone, not just you. And I find that to be a very American kind of idea where it's like, no, I want to make sure I get all of mine. But like you're saying, and like Anya talked about with Russia, it's very much like, no. Like you have enough until you've had enough, and then you're done. Like there's no reason to like overdo it. And that's a lesson you learned in 8th grade.
Yeah, and I think it's like comparing that type of drinking to the drinking that I had in college, for example.
Yeah, let's get there. Let's talk about it. So we fast forward to college, and now you're with. And the only reason I want to jump so far is because now you're in America, in Pennsylvania, with American students who haven't. some of which have never drank before,
Yep.
some of which had strict parents, and they're not going to drink till they get to college. So you're at college, and then how does that change? How does that experience?
Yeah, well, it was weird. So I joined a fraternity in my second semester.
Goddamn right you did.
Well, because that was so Carnegie
Was
Mellon
it an engineering fraternity or a tech fraternity, or was it?
It was just like a general
Okay.
fraternity, but I mean, so CMU was such a Carnegie Mellon was such a nerdy place that like really there wasn't a lot of social life outside of the fraternity.
Okay.
So like the only really drinking that was happening was like in like Greek
What was
life.
the fraternity? that you joined?
KDR, Kappa Delta Rho.
Kappa Delta Rho. You heard it here first. Pike is the only one I remember from college.
Pica, yeah, we had a Pica too.
Yeah. Okay. So you joined the frat, and then joining the fraternity, was that a conscious decision? Like, I want to, like you said, it's a nerdy school. The only like people who are having fun are in the fraternity. So is that why you joined?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I joined it is I met another Venezuelan guy who's Venezuelan American, so he had grown up in Florida but had been born in Venezuela. So like we became friends, and then
Yeah.
that's kind of how it was like. I met like the other people in the frat. And I was like, oh, these people are cool, like whatever, and then ended up joining. And I feel like I didn't like the first semester that much. I didn't have like a great time.
Yeah.
At Carnegie, I had to meet like a ton of friends and stuff. So I was like,
Well,
all right,
because
let's give it a try.
you're by yourself basically.
Yeah, exactly. I had been to Pittsburgh like one time in my life.
That's what I'm
but-
saying. You're not going there with like a
Yeah.
bunch of high school friends or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So when the first year that you're there, is there any like, are you going to any parties or anything like first semester, or was it until you joined the frat where you were like, all right, here we go?
It was more the frat.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't party that much the first semester. yeah.
Because you've said on stage and on the podcast so far that Carnegie Mellon is kind of a nerdy campus.
Yeah.
Was there hazing to join the fraternity?
Uh,
No, that's a no. That's a
basically,
no.
yeah. I feel like if there had been like actual hazing, I probably wouldn't have joined. To be honest,
Yeah.
like I didn't want it that badly that I was like, we had like one thing where it was like you have to like interview every brother and like, but if they were just drunk enough,
But
they
it's
would
not
just,
hazing, yeah.
Yeah, it's not hazing. Yeah.
So the reason I ask is because when I was in high school, because I'm 34, so when I was in high school, I'd get the shit kicked out of me by like my teammates, and they'd be like, "Oh, we're just hazing him, like we're just making him tough, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Well, why am I the only one getting the shit?" Anyway,
Right.
that's for the therapist. But then when I got into college, I noticed that the hazing had like for the fraternities and stuff. Because again, I played college football, but I noticed from the fraternity lifestyle, like it had toned down. I was like, "Oh, I thought you got those like shit kicked out of you as far as hazing." And then that was kind of, and then I started dating my ex-fiance, who was 5 years younger than me. So when she was in her sorority, their kind of hazing it wasn't like eat dirty tampons or something. It was just like literally the hazing was you cannot drink while you're pledging. You can't party, you can't drink.
Wow.
To see how bad you want to be a part of the sorority, which and psychologically is actually way more detrimental to your college experience than like getting fucked with. But that was like their kind of
Yeah.
hazing was like you can't party or can't drink.
Like psychological torture.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I remember like we'd be at parties and like there would be like girls that were pledging. They'd be like, "You can't take pictures. You can't take out your phone. You can't. I'm not even supposed to be here." Like, ooh. And I was like, "What is this? This isn't hazing."
This is weird. Yeah.
So you get to Carnegie Mellon, you join the frat the second semester, and you just have to interview a bunch of the brothers, and you're like, "All right, I'm in."
yeah, it was pretty easy, and then
When did it go? When did it start getting crazy? Did it ever get crazy?
I mean, it was like, I always say whenever I'm talking about anybody else, it's like, it was a Carnegie Mellon frat. So it never got like probably nearly as crazy as like a state school would have
Yeah.
gotten or something like that. I mean, we had like we had like a lot of like pong tournaments and like, you know, the sweaty basement parties, which I always thought were like coming from
Is it
Venezuela.
mostly- Is it mostly men at the university? Or is it a good mix?
It was, I think it was like maybe 70-30. Yeah. It was a
Guys to
bit-
girls?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The reason, because it's funny. There's a college called Assumption College. I don't know if you ever heard of
No.
it, but when they have a football team, it's like D3. But when they would recruit us in high school, one of the things they put on the flyer was 13-to-1 ratio of girls to guys. So if you go to Assumption College, you assume you're going to get some sumption. You know what I'm
God,
saying?
that is-
Hey. So, but with Carnegie Mellon, it being partly an art school but partly an engineering school, that's kind of a weird dynamic, because art school you would think more female, but engineering school you would think more male dominant. So for you it was mainly dudes.
It was. Yeah.
All
And
dudes
then-
all the time.
yeah.
Carlos has something he
I
wants
mean,
to tell the audience. No, I'm just
Life in tech. No.
kidding. Yeah, right.
Because no tech. I mean, the tech jobs are also like that. It's
It's
super
all dudes?
skewed towards males. Yeah. So I mean, so we try like at the parties they would try and like balance the guys,
Yeah.
try and keep like a ratio. or
Try
whatever,
everything
but-
they possibly could.
Yeah. Pay people now.
Those are called escorts, Carlos. That's something that's very well, do you guys have that in Venezuela?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was a big. That was one thing when you're saying about like not like fitting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a big escort culture in Venezuela, whereas like a lot of my friends had already had those experiences in like they were like 15, 16, and they had already
really?
like lost virginities to escorts and stuff. Yeah,
Not you.
not me.
Okay.
Not me. Didn't do that until I left Venezuela. No, I'm joking.
I nailed it. That's the clip. So I want to talk to you because you did send me something that was pretty funny about something you would do when you would get really drunk. And you sent me 2 examples of this. One was on a radiator, and then the other was later in life. So this was in college or
This
after
was
college?
not in college. So it's I don't know if it was like there was some weird.
So in college,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
just
yeah, no
for
worries.
the trajectory of the story, since I thought
yeah.
this was in college. So now that we're getting out of college, while you were at CMU, you guys would just have like a traditional, like you said, sweaty basement parties and beer pong tournaments and stuff like that. Nothing got too crazy.
Nothing got too crazy. I do have one story. Which
Go
one of the
ahead,
ones
shoot it.
Yeah. That one was in college, and then so a little bit of backstory. Like I would always, because I was such a rule follower, kind of growing up. Like the best friends that I ended up having were kind of people that were not like that. They were kind of, so one of my best friends in college, kind of a crazy character, always the instigator, getting in fights and stuff, big drinker. And we're out one night.
I didn't know you in college.
So we're out one night at this bar that we'd always go to, and then this was pre-Uber, so we had to like, get a cab to go home, right? So we're outside, and
Or
then,
you could just drive.
yeah, or
not
you could
be
just
a
drive,
little
which that's what I
bitch
did in
about it.
Venezuela. In Venezuela, that was completely accepted. I would like drive to the club, pick all my friends up, and drive back at 3 a.m, and like after a night.
This
of
is like
drinking.
after you've left and you're coming back to like visit and stuff?
This
Or
was
is
even
this
in
like
high
it-
school. This was like
Oh, God.
17, dude. It was wild how accepted all this stuff was.
We don't condone drinking and driving here on
We
the
definitely
podcast.
no,
We've
it definitely
talked about
don't.
this before.
I never really regret doing it. I was just so like.
Well, no, Joe
young,
List
you know?
talked about it. He's like, every time he's like, it happened. Like, I drank and drove, but every time
Yeah.
I talk about it on a podcast, people are like, that's terrible. He's like, well, what do you want me to do? Not say I did it?
Yeah, I was like 16, 17. I mean,
So you're getting cabs in college.
right. And then at some point, like everyone's waiting in the corner for like the cab to come through. And at some point, there's like another guy. It wasn't clear who was there first. And we could have just been nice. I mean, my friend could have been nice because he was kind of the instigator. He could have just let the guy take the cab, but somehow he starts like starting stuff. And then the other
And
guy
you're
was
just
like,
in the corner like, this is why I hang out with this guy.
I'm like mostly nervous to be honest, but I was pretty drunk, so I'm like like I don't know what's gonna happen. And then the guy's like deciding to walk away, and my friend's still like yelling at him far away.
So your friend won. In this moment, your friend got the cab. The guy's walking away.
Well, but he's still yelling at him,
Okay.
and then the guy at some point you see a switch go off in his head, and he turns around. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and then he runs at us. There's like a big guy, and then him and my friend like tackle each other right in front of me, and my first instinct was just to like, oh shit, and I just like kind of kicked the guy a little bit in the ribs. I honestly remember the moment. I don't think it was like that hard of a kick.
Yeah.
But as soon as that happens, I get put in a chokehold by cops.
Oh, no.
So those 2 cops had been doing the rounds right outside the bar, and they were really mean.
So
Like,
the second you
really
just
very
tag the guy, boom, you get hooked.
yeah, and they were like smacking me around like the cops, and they put me in handcuffs. They don't put anyone else in handcuffs.
Just you.
Just me. I'm walking around with my American passport because I was like for whatever reason I was using that as ID that night.
Yeah.
I give them my passport, and the guy's like, "Oh, born in Venezuela, like you foreigners don't know how to respect here."
Wow.
And I was like,
Do you think
wow.
he knew you were an immigrant, or not even an immigrant because you're a citizen? Did he? Because you, like you said, and like we talked about very early in the show, you joke about it all the time. But if I was walking down the street and I saw you, I wouldn't go Venezuelan.
Right. It was like he was like really trying to be racist.
I'm trying to like tiptoe around, like not being like, well, you don't look Venezuelan, because I hate
No,
when
I mean,
people do that.
I
but-
generally don't. I mean,
Yeah.
even in Venezuela, I was kind of more like the American kid,
Yeah.
so it was a little bit of that too. But
So do you think he had any idea? Because
until he saw the passport,
Yeah.
I don't think he had any idea. Yeah.
so he was
Yeah.
just tagging. He was just mad at you because you were kicking the guy when he was down, basically.
Yeah, but the guy wasn't even down yet. It was like they were.
I
like
love how
still-
when you did the act out, you're like, I just kicked him, like just a little, because that's not even like that's not even assault. Like you're just.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they take all my information. I'm freaking out.
So
'cause
he
it's, like,
literally
senior
says you
year.
foreigners don't know how to act.
Yeah, you foreigners don't know how to come in here and respect or something like
Okay.
that. Something, and I'm like, I'm also really drunk. I'm like, so sorry, man. And he's like, stop calling me man. And he just like slapping me. Yeah. So then we leave. They like let me go. They take all my information. And then I wake up the next day. I'm like, should I like report these guys because they were like hitting me,
Yeah.
and insulting me and like saying like racist stuff or whatever. And then a couple weeks later, I choose not to. A couple
Okay, I
weeks
was gonna
later,
say, yeah. So do you get released on your own recognizance?
Yeah,
They
I
just
didn't,
let you
even, I
go?
didn't even take me anywhere. They just like handcuffed me, like smacked me around, whatever, took my information, then let me go.
Okay.
But then I wake up the next day with like a sore throat. Like I had never been put in a chokehold like that before. It felt like I had had a
Like
cold.
that, you mean a chokehold ever?
Yeah, basically. Well, no, I'm joking.
Hey, talking about the apps. So then what happens?
So then 2 weeks later, I got something in the mail saying I'm getting charged with
you have to go to court
with
yeah.
misdemeanor, simple assault, whatever. In the description, it says that I threw the guy down to the ground and kicked him in the head.
Which is not what
they
happened.
Straight up made up like what happened. Yeah,
Now, are the police at this point wearing body cams?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this would have been because you're
This
my
was
age,
like
so this would have been
2010.
yeah. So yeah, they're
A while
not.
ago. Yeah.
Because what happens in my experience, the last time I got arrested was 17, and they showed me the body cam footage because I was like, I'm gonna fight this, and I just got a public defender because I was pre-law, so I was like, well, I'm already dead to rights. Like, there's nothing. Hiring a $10,000 lawyer isn't gonna change anything. And I remember the public defender, the like second or third time we met, just slid the DVD across the table. She goes, plug that into the laptop, and I watch it and I go, yeah, I'm not gonna fight anything. We're gonna
fair
chalk
enough,
this up.
like, yeah.
But that's the thing is like, had they had their body cams on them, you could have filed an injunction to get the footage to be like, I didn't do any of this. But obviously
maybe.
2010, that's not an option. So
Yeah.
it's just your word against the cops.
And so I had interned at Amazon the year before, so I like used the remaining money I had from that internship to like get a lawyer, and then went to court. The cop didn't show up once. Went to court again. Like
They didn't drop it as soon as he didn't show up.
No, I got there and they like rescheduled. I think the first one maybe like the victim didn't show up, like the guy that I had kicked, and then the second one the cop didn't show up, and then they dropped it. I had to go to court twice.
So you dropped, yeah, nailed it.
And then I got it. I mean, all that just got expunged or whatever.
Yeah,
from, like,
it just goes away. Yeah, once they drop it, it doesn't exist
right,
anymore.
Right, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
You're just assaulting people out here. Look at that. Carlos almost had a record like I did. So then that happens in college.
Yep.
So then fast forward, we get out of college, and now you're living in Seattle. Are you partying? Are you getting, because some of the stuff you sent me, I was kind of like, this doesn't seem like Carlos. So how do you find yourself in these situations?
Yeah. So in Seattle, I think I had like I experimented a little bit in college with like drugs and some stuff like that, just like just like tripping and psychedelics and stuff like that, and that kind of continued into Seattle. I was
of course
like,
it's Seattle.
Yeah, and at the time that I was living in Seattle, also huge male female like disparity, like way more men than women. I couldn't.
It seems to follow you around in your life.
It's just the tech thing. It really is the tech in all the tech cities. They're kind of just like that, unfortunately. But anyway, so in Seattle was also like the stereotype of Seattle is very much. I don't know if you've been there, but it's like the darkness.
Yeah,
and like
it's always cloudy. It's always rainy.
Lightly raining.
I've seen Twilight.
Yeah, it's very much true, and I couldn't deal with it, and so I was like,
so it really affected you.
It very much affected me. Like that ended up being kind of one of the reasons why I left. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I couldn't go past like 3 years.
So then you're in Seattle. Are you, other than experimenting with some of the stuff, are you like going to parties? Like what's happening? Like,
yeah.
Tech people throw ragers? I don't know how that works.
Ish. I don't know. Maybe they would call them ragers, but other people would just call them regular parties.
Because I've had people on, and this is from my experience, just like some of the smartest people in the world that I know, the only way they know how to decompress is with drugs and alcohol. So they go insane. Like they throw huge parties, and you're like, you're a fucking like valedictorian. Like, what's happening right now? And they're like, I don't know any other way to calm down.
Yeah.
So,
I met a lot of characters like that.
Okay,
too.
yeah. So in Seattle, were you partying like that, or was it more laid back?
I had a few friends that had moved also from Carnegie Mellon from college into Seattle. So then if we had like a particularly stressful week, we'd like go out like, Friday, Saturdays, like to the bars and stuff. But Seattle wasn't that crazy of a scene, to be honest. Like I feel like when I moved to San Francisco, that had
Let's get into
more.
it. What happened?
Yeah, so that's where I met a lot of characters of people, like, especially with like Burning Man.
Yeah.
And you meet a lot of people that are very much into like drugs and stuff like that. And just drinking. But I lived in one house that was like all burners.
Are you living with roommates at all these different stops?
Yeah.
Okay.
I lived with roommates. Maybe 1 year I lived alone in Seattle, but for the most part with roommates.
Okay.
I lived in one house of like 6 or 7. It was like a huge house. The mom of the girl that owned it was like super rich and had bought this like really big house. It had like 2 kitchens. It was like
oh wow.
But there was like 8 people living in this house on like across like 2 different floors. And this it's not drinking related, but like there was a lot of like whippets.
God.
And I had never experienced whippets in Venezuela. And I was like, this is so...
You guys don't have Ready Whip in Venezuela?
I don't think we ever like used them as like drugs, but I think we have. we have like whipped cream or whatever it is.
Yeah, I remember. God, I remember the first time I did a whip it. I didn't even know what to do, and someone in my family, I won't say who, but they were just like, "Oh, turn it right side up and breathe it in," and I did, and I was like, "Oh, this is so weird."
Yeah.
But are you doing it out of the cans, or are you guys getting like real nitrous oxide?
They had, well, it was like I don't know if they would like transfer it from like a bigger thing into the whatever. There's like a name for the machine.
Like the spray can or whatever?
Yeah, you like use it to get cream and turn it into whipped cream. Like
Yeah,
those
yeah.
machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing. I forget what it was called.
I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they have them at some of the fancier like pastry places. They have them where they put in sugar and cream and then shake it up and then flip it upside down and it like turns it into.
Right.
Yeah,
those
yeah.
things, yeah.
So you're just doing that every day on occasion? Like what's happening?
I mean,
your roommates are doing them all the time?
Yeah, I honestly I only made it like a year in that house because
Okay.
it was like this was like
Was because it was too intense?
it was too intense. It was like whippets during the week. I was like, this is like Whip It Wednesdays or not that they would call it that.
That's a great thing. They should have called it that. So when does the radiator thing happen?
The radiator thing happened.
Is that in New York? 'Cause-
Oh, sorry, I skipped. That was in Seattle. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because that wasn't the first time, or that was the first time, but it won't be the last time that you do something like this.
Yeah. So I never had any like pee story. A lot of my friends in the frat had them in college,
Yeah.
and I never, for whatever
I
reason.
used to pee myself all the time.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, I'm an
that happened to me
alcoholic.
too.
Yeah, I'd get blackout drunk and just wake up and be like, "What happened?"
Yeah, that's happened to me too. But so this girl, we like hooked up, and then we had been drinking a lot, and then in the middle of in the morning I wake up and she's like, Carlos, like, do you know what you did? And I'm like, no. And she's like, no, I woke up in the middle of the night, you were peeing like into my radiator, like into my heater. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then she's like, and then when I asked you to stop, you were like, what? I'm just peeing. Like, leave me alone. Like, and I was like, oh God. Yeah, that was my 1 out of 2 pee story.
Did you, at the time, because this has happened to me, did you think you were in the bathroom?
I think I must have.
Because I've heard,
Yeah.
I've had people on before and tell stories about like going into a closet to pee or going into like, for me, I remember one time in college I woke up and I had my TV on like a nightstand almost, and then I had all my books in the nightstand. And I remember I woke up out of my bed and I walked over and I opened up the nightstand and then just peed into it thinking it was the bathroom.
Right.
And I remember that because I still had to use those books for class and they all stunk like pee. Yeah, that's why it's burned into my brain.
That's funny. She said that she turned on the radiator a few days later and she had to turn it off because it smelled horrible.
Did you ever figure out what happened? Like, did she ever get it cleaned? Or did you never speak to her again?
No, we were like friends, kind of,
Okay.
like the same friend groups. I definitely
Yeah.
saw her again. I didn't
never
follow
asked
up
about it?
I didn't follow up about the heater.
If
I probably
anybody out
should've.
there knows the person who lives in Seattle that Carlos peed on their radiator, reach out at BrennanTComedy.com. Reach out. Let us know.
Or send them a radiator, yeah.
I just want to know what happened with the radiator because you can't get that smell out.
Oof.
I just went to my ex's to see the dog the other day, and she had to throw like 2 of the rugs out. And I was like, "Why is all this hard? Like, what happened to all the rugs?" She goes, "She wouldn't stop peeing on them, so I just had to throw them away." Like, she might have had to throw that radiator out, man.
Do you think the dog was sad because of the like breakup or something? Or, like,
We don't have to get existential about this, but yeah, I think the dog is
That's
incredibly
where my
sad.
mind goes.
Yeah, that's why we're comics. Yeah, man, I'm the only one that takes that dog to the park. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. So this happens, and then when was the next one? How long away was it?
The next one was like maybe 3 years later.
Okay, so it's not like something that was. I was going to name the episode "The Pea Bandit," but this isn't something that's happening all the time.
No, the other one was I think more of like me thinking that I was going to the bathroom because it's
Okay.
like we were like, but it always happens somewhere where you're not living, right? It's also like the yeah. So we were at my friend's place. He was living in LA, and it was like a bunch of my college friends went to like visit.
Is
for the
this
weekend.
So you said a couple years after Seattle. So this is when you're living in San Francisco.
This was. I'm pretty sure I was living in San Francisco at the time. Yeah.
So not doing stand up yet, still intact, doing the San Francisco thing.
Yeah.
And then you go to visit a friend in LA.
Yeah.
What's the friend doing in LA?
He was working, I think, in like finance or like banking or something.
So just another one of those people.
Yeah. He had a really nice apartment, like overlooking the beach.
You said he's working in banking and
Yeah,
finance.
it was a sweet place. So we it's like 5 of us crashing in his place, and then went out, like did like karaoke.
Yeah.
Like big night, and then
Big night karaoke for the tech guys. Big
Exactly.
night.
It is, yeah. And then this one I do remember, like kind of blacking in or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and like it's like 4 a.m, and my friend's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, stop it. And I'm just peeing into like the corner of his like room. It was like right by the entrance. It was like,
Was this the guy who owned the house, the apartment? Was this
yeah,
his
he was the
room?
one
His
that,
room?
yeah, he was like renting, but yeah.
Oh man, that's the best. That's probably the most alpha thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
no, look
This
at
is
me.
my
I'm the
corner.
captain now. I am the captain now.
Yeah, exactly. But he was super. I mean, he had his stuff peed on before, like many times.
Yeah.
So he was
He's
already
even
used
paid
to that.
for it sometimes.
Yeah, it
Heyo.
wasn't and like I think someone had peed in his laptop once, so it was like as far as like damage to his property,
It was
this
fine.
pee story was like not that much,
Yeah.
not that bad for him. Yeah.
God. Two pee. You're the pee bandit, man. We got to get you really drunk one day so you pee with something else. I wanted to ask you about the trouble. I want to get to the elevator story, but I want to save that for last because that one was funny to me. But the trouble with mom. Because you had talked about earlier how you hadn't gotten much trouble for drinking and stuff. It was an accepted part of the culture. But you had sent me a story about getting in big trouble with your mom. What was that about?
Yeah, and that one wasn't even so much for drinking. It was more that like my parents. I was very much a rule follower. I was kind of like the good kid.
Yeah.
And my parents.
What year set this up? How old are you when this
This
happens?
is probably senior year of high school. So
Okay,
probably like
so
17,
18,
18, yeah.
yeah.
So then my parents are very much like, which is something that I kind of live like this today too, is like Monday to Friday you kind of like work hard, and then Friday and Saturday you can do whatever you want. You kind of
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, exactly. So then she would like never let me go out during the week.
Okay.
And then one Thursday, like my friends were having a party, which wasn't that common, and I was like, come on, like let me go. And
Come
then
on.
She let me go, and then I just did not kind of control myself, and like ended up coming back like hammered at like 4 a.m, and she had called me like 5 times.
Oh, really?
And it takes a lot for my mom to get mad at me because like I would generally follow the rules. I was like
Yeah.
a pretty good kid, but when she did get mad at me, she was like very mad.
So what ended up happening? Did you get grounded? Were you not allowed to go out? Or
I remember
what is my mom getting mad at me in Venezuela? What does that look
Yeah,
like?
I think I'm pretty sure she grounded me. Like she definitely didn't let me like go out for a while. I do remember something funny. Was like the hangover was so bad. I had to go to school the next day. Obviously, and like I'm in the library. I ended up like puking in the library.
Did you really?
Yeah, like in the bathroom, but still.
Oh, you made it to the bathroom this
Yeah,
time?
I made it to the bathroom, but that was rough. But yeah.
You don't always make it to the bathroom, Carlos. That's why I asked.
Nice. Zing.
So I wanted to ask you, we have time for one more story. The elevator one. I'm assuming this happened in New York.
Wait, which one was the elevator? I'm trying to remember.
You talked about getting in an elevator and basically harassing everybody.
Oh, this is. Oh, yeah. I didn't. Yeah, this one I didn't get that much trouble for. It was more just my own.
No, this just sounds
self-embarrassment.
hilarious, which is why I wanted to save it.
I would like. So this was one where it's like we went. So I lived in a city called Valencia, which is 2 hours away from the capital, which is Caracas.
Okay.
So we had gone to
Oh,
visit
so this
my
is in
family
Venezuela.
friends. Yeah, it's in Venezuela. This was also I was like probably 16, 17.
Okay.
And end up going out with like my parents' friends, like
I'm sorry.
sons. Yeah.
So you're you're not visiting Venezuela.
living
you're
in
living
Venezuela.
in
It's
Venezuela.
like high school.
Okay.
Yeah. Or at least I'm pretty sure. But I was probably like 18 and living in Venezuela.
Okay. So this is before you left for Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah. So we go out with like my parents' friends, like sons
Yeah.
that were like a lot older. And one of them, when, and I feel like this happens, it's like someone decides like they're gonna get you drunk.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And like that, it was
I'm
that
normally
situation.
that guy where I'm like, everyone in here is getting
Yeah.
fucked up.
Exactly. So it was like, I just remember drinking like a lot of vodka, and then at some point we're in an elevator, we're like leaving.
Where
And
are you leaving though? Where are you?
We're we're like at a bar. We're leaving the bar,
And there's an elevator in the bar.
and there's an elevator to go down to the parking
Venezuela
lot.
doesn't sound like it's doing that bad. All right, there's elevators in the bar.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it was like a nice building, but anyway, so we're going
Economic
down to
downturn my ass. Well, that was
there's
also
it is funny how like in
12 years ago.
even in a place where it's like everything's going generally poorly for most of the people, there's always going to be some sliver of society that
Oh,
like
yeah,
lives
always.
very well.
Is that I wanted to
It's
ask you?
unfortunate, yeah.
Speaking of the unfortunate, like wealth gap in society, let's get into it. In Venezuela, is there like it's made fun of in South America and Latin American countries, and same thing in Eastern Europe about corruption and stuff like that. Is that like a prevalent thing where
Oh,
there's
yeah.
like a
100%.
governor who has like 1,000 acres and a giant mansion, and then there's people starving in the street?
Yeah, pretty much like if you're involved in politics or you're involved in the military, like they're like rich people
Okay.
just because they're associated with the government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's
That
tons,
makes-
and all this that's fueled by corruption. And like,
all right.
yeah.
Because there's that whole skit on Parks and Rec where, the actor from Portlandia, who I'm talking about.
Yeah, Fred Armisen.
Fred Armisen, thank
Yeah,
you. He's like the Venezuelan general. He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's a funny episode.
yeah. You undercooked the chicken, straight to jail. You
Straight to
overcooked the
jail.
chicken, straight to jail. But that's all based on like a Venezuelan dictator thing, so that's why I didn't know.
Yeah, it's like loose. I mean, it's definitely exaggerated and embellished.
No,
and stuff.
absolutely. But I just remember the country
stuff,
he was from was Venezuela.
Yeah, he was from Venezuela in that episode. Yeah, but all the corruption stuff. It's like the reason why you could like drink and drive, for example, is like, you get pulled over. Like technically, it's illegal, but you can just pay, like it's just a matter of like how much money you need to pay the person that like pulled you over.
I tried that once in America.
Where? Here? Ooh.
Yeah. I was my first DUI. I remember I kept yelling. I had just come from work and I went to the bar and then I got pulled. It's check it out on the One Man Show. Premieres May 31st on Patreon.
Nice.
But the officer was like taking me to jail, and I remember I just kept like in the back. I was like, "Listen, man, I've got $270 from my shift tonight in my wallet. You can have it." And he's like, "Are you bribing an officer?" I go, "I'm not bribing anybody. All I'm saying is if I leave my wallet in the back of this car, you think you could pull over and let me out and I might forget my wallet?" And he laughed it off because obviously I was hammered and, I'm jovial and like having a good time. But in retrospect, my buddy who became a lawyer was like, "Dude, that's bribing an officer. That's like 5 years minimum." And I was like, "Oh boy, well, I'm glad he didn't take that seriously."
Ooh.
But in Venezuela, you can just do that.
You can just do that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I've had to bribe an officer one time. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
How did you never tell that story?
I wasn't drunk. I was just like, I kind of just forgot about this, I guess. So one time I got pulled over and it was like, they usually just ask for whatever documents you need. Like they do here too.
Money.
Yeah. Basically, but like you also just drive around with stuff that's expired because if you get pulled over, you just have to pay them off.
Yeah.
But I had never done this before. So it's like, I had something that I had was like expired, and the guy's like, "Oh, what are we gonna do about this?" And I call my dad, and I'm like, because he's like, everyone.
Your dad's
like,
Venezuelan.
Yeah, everyone in Venezuela is like an expert at it. So I'm like, "Oh, what do I do?" He's like, "Well, just say, hey, what can we do about this? Like, use these words."
Yeah.
And he'll say something, and I just ask him like how much he wants or whatever, and then I just like.
How much does it cost to?
I don't remember. It was probably like, if you change it to dollars, probably like $3 or something.
Yeah,
I don't know, something
easy
like
peasy.
yeah.
In, out, on with life.
Yeah,
We
it's
should
not like
move
a
back
lot.
to Venezuela.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of reasons I miss it. Not necessarily the bribing, but like
but
other stuff. Yeah.
So we're in the elevator in Venezuela at this bar, and then what happened? You said you were going to leave the bar, and you're hammered on vodka.
So in the elevator, there's like these girls that are in the elevator that were not part of our group, and for whatever reason, apparently I like started like opening up my shirt, and I was like, and I started saying like, "Me quieres coger," which means like, "Oh, you want to fuck me?" And I'm pretty sure I was a virgin back then. I was like, I had never had sex, and I'm just like telling this girl if she wants to fuck me.
So what ended up happening? Did you get slapped, or did they just storm out of the elevator?
I think they just ignored me because I was so drunk that they were just like, "We're not even gonna address."
You're like
this.
the guys on the subway when they come in and they're like, "Hey, everybody," and you're just like, look straight ahead, don't acknowledge them, don't acknowledge them. God, well, this was a lot of fun, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
Let's see if we
I had
didn't
a
do
good time.
anything to destroy your future endeavors.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, right. Plug everything one more time. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Oh yeah, Carlos G Comedy on Instagram, and the show at Eastville is American Immigrants, May 9th, 8 p.m.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. At Brennan T. Comedy on all social media. BrennanTComedy.com. Again, the one-man show, Ex-Drinking Buddy, a comic's look at life, near-death, recovery, and redemption will premiere on Patreon May 31st, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll talk to you all next week.
Cool, man. Thanks so much.